Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Preview Fantasy Football Edition. I'm Jim Derry, and joining me today is NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune sports columnist, Jeff Duncan. Dunk, let's just jump right into it.
Let's do it.
All right, when you talk about Saints and their skill players, or really any position for that matter, it kind of starts and ends with Drew Brees, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's the one guy, if you're a fantasy football owner, I think you can hang your hat on every week. You know he's going to produce. He's had a number of 5,000-yard seasons, among the most in the NFL history. And the way this offense is built, Sean Payton puts a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. So I think he's your one guy that if you're looking at a top pick on this offense, you can go to and realize that consistently he's going to produce each week.
3 straight years, though, of declining yardage and touchdown totals. TDs go down from 39 to 33 after he had 46 in 2011. Where do you see his touchdown number? You think it jumps up from 33, and his yardage total, does he hit the 5,000 mark?
Well, I think he'll be right around both those numbers. I don't think he's going to decline drastically at all. He said the other day after the preseason game against the Patriots that he's refined his mechanics in the offseason and that he's healthy again. And he does. His ball does look like it has more zip. So he was obviously battling some injuries last year. Now what he's got to do is find a replacement. We're going to talk about that later. Find a replacement for Jimmy Graham in the red zone. That's a huge issue, I think, for this offense. But if they're able to do that, I think his numbers are going to be fine. I mean, he looks good. And I actually think these young receivers they have in this group, they're a bunch of unknowns, but they've got a lot of talent. And I can tell you privately, the Saints coaching staff is very, very enthusiastic about this year and that group in particular. Yeah,
and he talked about finally he feels like he's over the oblique injury and that how much when you're throwing the football, how much that people don't realize. It's not about so much about how strong your arm is, how you generate power from your oblique, and he thinks that that's going to help him.
Your core, and he talks a lot about comparing it to pitching, and the pitching is almost all your legs.
Right.
Nolan Ryan used to talk about that all the time. His leg strength is what gave him his power. Same thing when throwing a football, and if you watch Drew Brees, his mechanics are flawless. And I actually think he's going to have a really good season. It's all going to come down to how well they protect for him.
Yeah.
All is built around the offensive line, and I think the Saints have done a good job in the offseason of improving their line. I think Max Unger at center is a huge upgrade, and I actually think Terron Armstead is going to be on the verge of a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle.
Well, the offensive line is going to have to be great for the running backs, so let's jump into the running backs, and we'll start off with Mark Ingram. He just missed the 1,000-yard rushing season last year, and his average draft position this year, as of now, is about right around 50, so he's getting drafted in the 4th, 5th round in a lot of leagues. Talk about Mark Ingram. Do you see him carrying that momentum into the season?
Well, I think he's going to have the best numbers of any back since Deuce McAllister. Now, what those numbers are, I don't know, but I think they're going to be right around what he had a year ago, maybe a little more, because I do think he's going to see more touches. When he came in, Jim, I thought he was going to be a dynamite NFL player and actually wrote a couple of columns touting him, and it didn't look so good for the first few years, but we saw flashes of it last year, and he's playing with more confidence now, more burst, making people miss. And so I think he's going to get every opportunity to have this big year. He's going to be more involved in the passing game, so I think that's going to help his numbers come up a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe improve his touchdown totals, especially in the red zone like we talked about. They've got to find somebody to replace him, so I think it's going to be by committee. All these players are going to fill in to replace Jimmy Graham in the red zone. So I'm bullish on Mark Ingram. I don't know if he's going to be one of the top 8 backs in the league.
Yeah.
I think he'll be right there in that second group.
It's funny because he's the only guy in New Orleans, if you draft around the metro area with a bunch of hoodats, he's the only guy you can get a decent value on because people tend to dislike him, I'm assuming because he went to Alabama. But.
Oh, there's no question. Yeah, he's a polarizing guy. But I think, and if you know Mark Ingram's a really good dude. I mean, he's a really good guy in the locker room, does a lot of stuff for his teammates quietly, very popular in the locker room. But he hasn't caught on with the Saints fan base yet.
Does he have 1,000 yards rushing this season?
Yeah, I think he'll get there, but, like everything, right, you got to stay healthy.
Okay, let's move on to C.J. Spiller. Big addition in the offseason for this team, who was lacking without Darren Sproles, that they were obviously missing there. And although C.J. Spiller isn't the same exact type of back that Darren Sproles is, he seems to sort of fill that role a little bit. How do you see him, assuming he's healthy? And as of now, August 23rd that we're filming, 24th that we're filming this show. He looks like he should be ready for regular season.
Well, that's what they're saying, and that's the hope. I can tell you when he came in from Buffalo, the scouting report I got on him from the writers in Buffalo was Dynamic playmaker out of the backfield, great all-around talent, return skills, track speed, but gets nicked up a lot and is often hurt. Sounds a lot like Reggie Bush, doesn't it? I mean, so I think that's the kind of role we're going to see out of him. He's going to have to stay on the field to be productive, and that's always dicey, right? When you're a fantasy owner, you have a player, you want a guy that's going to be a bell cow every week that you know can be consistent. I'm not sure Spiller's that guy. He might be 1 week 120 yards, and then the next week 10. And that's always dangerous, I think.
If you're drafting in the 7th round, you haven't got your second running back, do you go after C.J. Spiller?
Well, I think he's definitely worth the upside, yeah. I think roll the dice on him. We're going to find out a lot more, but right now he's a complete unknown, not only because of the injury factor, but also just the way the Saints use their running backs. And I think Mark Ingram right now is a guy that they know they can rely on. He's going to be their #1 option.
Let's close out with Kyrie Robinson on running backs. And last year he had 76 carries, 362 yards, 3 touchdowns. Is those the sort of numbers you think you expect to see from Kyrie this year?
I think he'll be right around there. Now, he's the guy that, say, for instance, Mark Ingram does get banged up and has to miss a game. They're going to put Kyrie Robinson in that role. I don't think they're going to change C.J. Spiller's role. So he will not be the #2 back and just step right in. Spiller, I'm talking about. It'll be Robinson. And he's probably the best, most physical runner that the Saints have.
Yeah.
The most elusive, the hardest guy to bring down. But right now he's slotted in at #3. Hard to see him getting enough touches on game day to amount to much.
Let's move over to the tight ends. And, really with the tight ends for the Saints, there's really only one question. It's not about how much Ben Watson will produce or whether Josh Hill will produce.
Right.
No one's Jimmy Graham as he's moved on. Who's going to have more fantasy value for this team at the tight end position? Will it be Ben Watson or is it Josh Hill?
Well, I know the talk right now is about the great camp Ben Watson's having, but if I'm a fantasy owner, I would take Josh Hill. I think Josh Hill's going to be the guy that scores the touchdowns. Now, whether he ends up playing more snaps, I don't know. Probably Ben Watson's going to get more snaps because he blocks better. But Josh Hill's going to be the guy that I think Drew Brees looks to when they get in the red zone. We saw that the other night in the Patriots preseason game. Josh Hill got the ball in the red zone and scored. And I think he's just got more upside right now than Ben Watson, who's 30 in his mid-30s.
I hope the guys in my fantasy league don't agree with you. I'll just say that.
Right, let's leave that out there, right?
All right, wide receivers, let's move on. And although there are more dynamic players and younger players, yet when you talk about wide receivers, you still have to start with Marcus Colston. It's the guy that Drew looks for first, and as long as he's wearing number 12 in black and gold, he's going to look for him first.
Well, he's got Brees' ultimate trust, and he's made a living in this league on those seam routes. He's going to continue to run that same route near the goal line, and that's what you're looking for when you're a fantasy owner.
Right.
When they get down in scoring territory, where is your quarterback going to look? And they're going to look to Colston. He's got incredible body control, incredible hands, and he just knows how to score. So I think his numbers are going to be probably overall less than they were a year ago because I think Brandon Cooks is going to become that #1 guy. But I still think Colston's going to catch a lot of touchdown passes this year.
4 straight 1,000-yard seasons for Colston before he had 2 in the 900s last 2 years. His last year was his worst since his rookie season. Do you think he's still in the 900s? Is that
no, I think he'll be a little lower than that because I think Cooks is going to end up taking a lot of those touches away from him. They want to get the ball in Cooks' hands as often as possible.
Well, speaking of Brandon Cooks, let's go right into it. Last year he seemed to progress throughout Week 10 before he was out the rest of the season. He has the injury and he's gone. What are you expecting from this 22-year-old? Is he 21? He's 21.
Yeah, well, he's part of a trend that we're seeing in the NFL right now. Remember, everybody was going to the big receivers with Larry Fitzgerald and Calvin Johnson. Now we're seeing these guys like Steve Smith-type receivers, T.Y. Hilton, Philip Dorsett just got drafted to the Colts, and I think Brandon Cooks fits that mold. He's obviously a speedster in and out of his cuts, very difficult to cover, and I think Sean Payton is going to want to get the ball in his hands a number of ways on those bubble screens. We see him come around taking reverses, and right now he's almost uncoverable in practice. He's clearly the most dynamic receiver the Saints have. Now, again, he's got to stay healthy as well. He's a smaller guy. Got nicked up a year ago. We'll see if he can get through the season this year. If he does, he's going to have a huge year.
Assuming you don't get one of the top guys, the Dezes, the Calvin Johnsons of the world, you go running back, maybe you go quarterback. How early would you be willing to draft Brandon Cooks?
Oh, I would go. I'm bullish on Brandon Cooks. I think he's going to have a monster year. So in my opinion, he's right there in near that first group. A guy that you might be able to take a little lower just because people aren't thinking of him. But in terms of at the end of the year, I think his production is going to be as good as anybody's.
Quickly, let's talk about sleeper, and a lot of people are high on Brandon Coleman. He's jumped up to third on the depth chart ahead of Nick Toon. And what do you see for him? Is he going to play a big role, and do you see him starting as the number 3 guy?
Yeah, he's definitely the number 3. He's the guy they want to be the number 3, and he's going to get every opportunity. Now he's got to seize the opportunity. He had a chance to make a play the other night in the preseason, so we see that they're already grooming him to be a red zone option. Look, he's 6'6", he's 215, he's got incredible athletic ability.
Yeah.
Now he's got to put it all together, and it's a big leap to go to the NFL and do it on Sundays under the bright lights. So we'll see. I think the jury's still out on Brandon Coleman, but they're going to give him a lot of opportunity to make plays in the red zone.
He had a little trouble with drops last year and
and at Rutgers.
Yeah,
it carried with him to the NFL, but he's got all kinds of potential, and Sean Payton is really, really high on him, and that's really what matters when you're playing for the Saints. So he's going to be the guy at number 3. But where does that leave? When you start looking at Spiller and Ingram,
right.
and you know how the Saints operate, Jim. I mean, they're democratic in how they distribute these touches, and that's what I think drives fantasy owners crazy about the Saints is other than Jimmy Graham, we really haven't had a guy that you can hang your hat on that every week is going to produce. Colston's always pretty steady. But from week to week, the way the Saints run their offense, the way Sean Payton likes to attack defenses, he wants as many options as he can have, and then he wants to be able to attack the weaknesses on the other team.
Give me a sleeper at number 4. Who's going to be the number 4 receiver?
Right now, I think Joe Morgan's going to get it. It's Joe Morgan or Josh Morgan, one of the J's. But I like Joe Morgan just because he's different. He's a deep threat. He's got speed. They like the way he blocks. But he gives them something that Josh Morgan doesn't give, and that's the ability to go deep. And we've seen the explosive plays out of him in the past.
Real quickly, who's going to win the kicker job?
I think Dustin Hopkins will win it. He's been more consistent in camp. He's missed a few lately. But in the end, I think, and he's going to be a top-flight kicker if he can do it on Sundays, and we won't know that till he does it.
Before we wrap up, the Saints are in Vegas. They're somewhere around plus or minus 8.5. You got the over, the under?
I'm going over. I'm on board. I'm on board. Look, I don't think they're going to be much over that, but they might not take that to win the NFC South. They're in the middle class of the NFC, along with a lot of other teams. If they get some breaks that go their way, they stay healthy, they probably make the playoffs. If they don't, they could end up with another 7.
Percentage on playoffs?
I'd say about 60%. I'm not
60%.
going too far. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on our Saints Preview Fantasy Football Edition. I want to thank Jeff Duncan for joining me. I'm Jim Derry. Thanks for clicking on us. We'll see you soon.